Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2020 BBC miniseries adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now this series was created by Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat, who are the brainchilds behind the modern day version of Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch. And this adaptation stars Clearspan as Count Dracula, Dolly Wells as Sister Agatha, and John Heffernan as Jonathan Harker. Now, the BBC has been fairly ambitious this Christmas and New Year. They've done 3 major adaptations. The first one was War of the Worlds, which was just before Christmas, which I've reviewed on the channel, which was certainly watchable but undeniably a disappointment. And then we got A Christmas Carol directly over Christmas, leading up to Christmas Eve. An improvement, but again, I don't think it pleased everybody because of its the way it strayed from its source material, etc. And it was very, very dark. And then we had Dracula, and now because of those first 2, which you could argue were disappointments on some level, I had some trepidation about this show, Dracula, because the trailers looked corny as hell to me. It looked quite old-fashioned. And it just didn't seem to nail for me what I expected from a Dracula miniseries. However, after watching it, all 3 episodes, I've got to say I was deeply impressed with this miniseries. It was excellent for the most part. It was set over 3 episodes, and each episode was an hour and a half long. And the first episode essentially mainly focused on Dracula in Transylvania and Jonathan Harker, who turns up from the UK. And to put it into perspective, if you're not sure who the Jonathan Harker character is, if you remember the Bram Stoker's Dracula, which you can see behind me there, the Francis Ford Coppola one, Keanu Reeves played Jonathan Harker in that film, so that might put it in a little bit more perspective for you. So we have Jonathan Harker turning up to Count Dracula's mansion. However, he is essentially held there against his will and unwittingly fed upon by Dracula, which in turn makes him youthful again. And we also meet in that episode an excellent, brilliant character called Sister Agatha Van Helsing, who for most of that episode is seen interviewing Jonathan Harker after the events of his time in the mansion. And by the end of that episode, there is a full-on confrontation between Sister Agatha and Count Dracula, which was the highlight of this episode, and it was absolutely excellent for the most part. And I think Dolly Wells, who played Sister Agatha, was arguably the best thing in these 3 episodes. She was absolutely fantastic as Sister Agatha Van Helsing. Played a slightly different role in the 3rd episode, but was still excellent too. I really like the fact that they changed Van Helsing into a female character. It really worked because of this sparkling performance by Dolly Wells. She was funny, she was witty, she was unexpected in her approach to the role, and a real nemesis for Dracula. Even though she couldn't compete with him in regards to powers and things intellectually, she very much could compete with Dracula, and she was a brilliant addition to this miniseries that made it far better because she was there. The 2nd episode then focused on Dracula's journey from Transylvania to England, and it was mainly on a ship with some passengers that had been basically hand-selected by Dracula for him to feed on the journey, because as he feeds on these characters, he kind of absorbs everything they are, their intellect and their knowledge and their experiences. So he selected these people so that it will prepare him well for when he gets to England. And an excellent episode. Initially I thought it was going to be quite enclosed and claustrophobic because it was mainly set on a ship, but it actually turned out to be really excellent and a really good character piece. The 2nd episode, lots of great well written characters in there. And then the 3rd episode, and I'm not going to spoil it in case you haven't seen it, has a real twist, and I'm not going to talk much about the 3rd episode because you want to watch it for yourself. It took an unexpected turn for me. Did it work? Yes, I think it kind of pulled it off the third episode, but I think its quality was slightly down on the first two, mainly because of the direction it took. It was unexpected, but for the most part worked, I would suggest. So I've got to say, I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this miniseries. I thought Clearspan as Dracula was fantastic. It was a brilliant performance. He was witty, he was charming, humorous, horrific, frightening, everything that you would expect from a character like this. And I love the direction this miniseries took, in a sense of it was respectful to what's come before it. And what I mean by that is, if you're a fan of the Hammer films, Christopher Lee's performance previously, you're going to really like the respect that this miniseries shows. There's a real sense of Hammer horror about it, a real gothic approach to it, and it feels very familiar. And it will feel very familiar for traditional Dracula fans. By that I mean the Hammer horror ones, and the more literal fans of Dracula. By that I mean the novel Bram Stoker. It kind of glides along a fine line, this miniseries, between the two, between like say this on-screen versions of Dracula we've seen, and the literal versions of Dracula that you will know and will have seen on screen, like the Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola version. So it balances that fine line perfectly, I think, and its approach to telling this story, I thought, was excellent. It was very well done, really entertaining miniseries. It had everything. It had humour. It was well written. It looked fantastic. It had this gothic style. The cinematography at time was beautiful. It felt fresh. It felt new, while it felt old-fashioned at the same time. It was a really great adaptation, I think, of Dracula, and Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat have done it again, I would suggest. I think they've created something really nicely done here. I think the change in tone in the third episode for me only slightly drops it. I probably would have given this a 9, maybe a 9.5 out of 10, but this third episode slight change in tone for me, it just lowered my enjoyment ever so slightly from the first two episodes, even though I thought it worked for the most part, the third episode. So I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. A real success, I think, for the BBC after two, you could argue, depending on who you are, two misfires, even though I enjoyed A Christmas Carol more than I did War of the Worlds. But out of the three, I would definitely look to put Dracula in my collection. Thoroughly enjoyable, and one that I definitely suggest you check out if you missed it, by watching it on catch up on BBC iPlayer, or buy the DVD or the Blu-ray, because they do release them fairly quickly after their release on TV, certainly in the UK. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the review, and of course I'll see you next time for more reviews coming up in 2020 now on Screen Stars.